At the Dugway Proving Ground, Utah, the Air Force is conducting flight tests of the BGM-109 Tomahawk ground-launched cruise missile, or GLICM. GLICMs are launched from transporters capable of off-road movement and quick deployment to remote locations. 4 transporter erector launchers, each with 4 missiles, and 2 launch control centers will constitute an Air Force tactical GLICM unit. The missile is propelled from the launch tube by a solid fuel boost motor. Seconds after launch, the boost engine is jettisoned. The wings, tail fins, and engine intake extend, and the turbofan engine starts. The 1,500-mile range GLICM is equipped with a highly advanced terrain contour matching guidance system, which compares a radar picture of the flight path with previously stored data to guide it to the target. All primary test objectives, including launch from a transporter erector launcher, transition from boost to cruise flight, separation of the boost engine, and sustained cruise flight, were met. GLICM procurement will begin in fiscal year 1981, and initial operational capability is scheduled for December 1983. Current plans call for ground-launched cruise missiles to be deployed in Great Britain and on the European continent.
You need to put a bloody great mitts on her, isn't it? Why? She's not running away. Where is she?
I tell you what, you all step back, I'll let go of her. Right? You step back. Step back. Okay. I've let go of you. Right. You step back. Step back. She's been arrested for interfering with the fence. You step back. I'm just asking you to step back and open that and arrest this woman.
She's going to block out.
She's shot as much as you like and as long as you like. She's going good because she's going to be put under arrest. I'm asking you, I've had a chance to ask you to come with me yet. And use our jump targets. So use the causing it, not me.
And then can you tell me who you are and why you're here?
We're Barnsley, we manage West from Barnsley and Doncaster area, and we've come here to support the women of Greenham Common because we realise that their struggles are. Before the miners' strike, we had community police where they used to pop in your house, have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a chat. That's gone.
Yeah.
The relationship will never ever in our village with the police be the same.
And what's your name?
And Scarry.
Right. And is there anybody else here that feels the same about the police?
I think we all feel the same.
Yeah.
I think it's unanimous.
I think we speak on behalf of all our communities. They're saying in press that these mining communities is getting back to normal with community bobbies and a load of rubbish.
You know what the police are having to do in Yorkshire? They're having to go in the schools and they're taking their horses and their dogs and their police cars and saying to the children, come and have a look at my horse, come and have a look at my dog.
And that dog's bit their fathers.
And the police, these are the police that's battered their fathers to death on picket lines, and then they're saying to us, look, we're really a nice person.
I can't quite see your number. Can you lower your shoulder a bit?
Right, say stop getting fast.
You've got to be joking. They're getting towed now. Sorry. Just be careful.
Get 258, she'll help you. She's a rough woman. 258 will help. After all this today, coming down the road with all those women, or 20 or 30 women trying to stop 30 policemen, how did you feel then?
I'm so angry with what goes on because I've heard that man, men in anger, but women in anger. My God, being attacked by police now after all these years, when I can remember women being attacked in Manchester on unemployed demonstrations. And police, us policemen, running you down, and women coming out of houses and with aprons on, really poor women coming out. You bastards, get off those horses and fight like men if you're going to fight. It was awful, and I saw lots of men.
And this was in 1921?
You remember the time of the Love on the Dole sort of thing. He was in front of us, the man who wrote the book. I can't think of his name at the moment. He was actually in front of us with a banner, and we had a banner, Ewan McColl and myself, and we were right on the Salford Town Hall steps, and that was, I mean, they say if you want to die early, go and live in Salford. If you want to live a bit longer, go and live in Bournemouth. And we were actually always in that area because it was so poverty-stricken. It was awful. And women were running out who weren't involved in the unemployed demonstration, but came out of their houses when they saw the horse policemen running, chasing people from the demonstration and up the steps, even up the steps of the town hall, and we could see men lying in blood. It was awful.
But the women still felt strongly enough, although they weren't politically involved, to come out and do that.
Yes. Oh, they were just shouting, "You bastard, get off those horses." I mean, that's a word I never say, but they were really angry, and they were really worked up about how these horse policemen were running into people and knocking them down. It was dreadful. I mean, this is going on today.
And for women to do that at that time was really a big breakthrough if they'd not been involved, wasn't it?
It was a breakthrough, yes, it was. Because they were on the doorstep. They lived in little tiny houses, no wooden floors, earth floors. I've been in them. I went into some of their houses later, and they had earth floors. And good God, they had a picture of the royal family, and I couldn't believe it. And they said, well, you know, we're made to believe that the royal family is something and that, and we're beginning to realise that we are keeping them.
How old are you now?
76.
So, and how long do you think you've been working for peace and you've seen it get...
Since I was 14. I was in a peace group when I was 15. I was becoming political at 14. I started reading Jack London's books with my father, and he to me was, well, it was like a Bible to me. I mean, it wasn't the Iron Heel, which I read. It was a sure thing of struggles in America, working class struggles then. I mean, it was terrible in America, the unemployment, and people were starving even there, over there. And then the Wall Street crash and all that sort of thing. So, to me, the build-up from then, since the Soviet Union went a socialist communist country, that's been the worry of the Western world. They don't want communism in the world. They don't want to see communism showing their ideals. That's my feeling anyway. And I don't think Russia, Soviet Union want a war. They don't want a war, and I'm sure they don't. They've had enough. They lost 20 million in the last war, and they were brought into it. They're our allies, and now they're our enemy. What a crazy world.
When did you first go to Russia?
I went when I was 19. I went to a peace conference in 1929, and when I came back, I couldn't settle. I had a nervous breakdown because I had been living under a socialist society, to me, that was building up and going to get there if the West would leave them alone. But you know, from time to time, they've had troubles and one thing and another. Now this Chernobyl business, but it had to happen somewhere, didn't it? This very bad disaster, and it's happening in America all the time. I mean, we don't know what's going on. The press they don't tell us. The media doesn't tell us. There's so many things they don't tell us, and we've got to find out. And it's only by corresponding with people over there and one thing or another that you get the information. And they've had more leaks in America this year than they've ever had since they've had nuclear plants. But I mean, there's nothing said about it. We have leaks here. We've got leaks in France, which they never say anything about. More leaks than Britain, and Britain had bad enough. So the whole thing is a snowball with nuclear actions in nuclear activity. In plants and a nuclear war. It's going to happen. They're not going to not use these weapons. They keep saying it will probably start in Berlin. It will start in the oil countries and then go up to Soviet Union. That's what will happen.
My fellow Americans, at 7 o'clock this evening, Eastern Time, air and naval forces of the United States launched a series of strikes against the headquarters, terrorist facilities, and military assets that support Muammar Gaddafi's subversive activities. The attacks were concentrated and carefully targeted to minimize casualties among the Libyan people, with whom we have no quarrel. From initial reports, our forces have succeeded in their mission. Several weeks ago in New Orleans, I warned Colonel Gaddafi we would hold his regime accountable for any new terrorist attacks launched against American citizens. More recently, I made it clear we would respond as soon as we determined conclusively who was responsible for such attacks. On April 5th, in West Berlin, a terrorist bomb exploded in a nightclub frequented by American servicemen. Sergeant Kenneth Ford and a young Turkish woman were killed, and 230 others were wounded, among them some 50 American military personnel. This monstrous brutality is but the latest act in Colonel Gaddafi's reign of terror. The evidence is now conclusive that the terrorist bombing of La Belle discotheque was planned and executed under the direct orders of the Libyan regime. On March 25th, more than a week before the attack, orders were sent from Tripoli to the Libyan People's Bureau in East Berlin to conduct a terrorist attack against Americans, to cause maximum and indiscriminate casualties. Libya's agents then planted the bomb. On April 4th, the People's Bureau alerted Tripoli that the attack would be carried out the following morning. The next day, they reported back to Tripoli on the great success of their mission. Our evidence is direct, it is precise, it is irrefutable. We have solid evidence about other attacks Gaddafi has planned against the United States installations and diplomats and even American tourists. Thanks to close cooperation with our friends, some of these have been prevented. With the help of French authorities, we recently aborted one such attack, a planned massacre using grenades and small arms of civilians waiting in line for visas at an American embassy. Colonel Gaddafi is not only an enemy of the United States. His record of subversion and aggression against the neighboring states in Africa is well documented and well known. He has ordered the murder of fellow Libyans in countless countries. He has sanctioned acts of terror in Africa, Europe, and the Middle East, as well as the Western Hemisphere. Today, we have done what we had to do. If necessary, we shall do it again.
Well, it was a very emotional experience. I'd never done anything like that before. I felt as though I was breaking the law even to come here. I felt as though, you know, I was confronting the police. We walked all the way around from the orange gate to the violet gate, and the emotional thing for me was that we brought things that we wanted to put up on the fence that we thought were marvellous and beautiful. And I brought my father's letter that he'd written from the Somme on Good Friday, 1916. And he'd written in it to his parents that he was only about 18. That on Good Friday, people ought to shake hands with the enemy on Good Friday because that was the best day to do it. Just as he'd heard that they had shaken hands on Christmas Day. And that he hoped his parents, he was imagining his parents in church on that Good Friday. And he was writing this letter. So I made a copy of it and I put it up on the fence. And it was all terribly weepy, we were, weren't we?
Remember when we came home and we left the base and it was dark? And all the candles around the base.
Yes.
And none of us wanted to leave. None of us wanted to go, and we were all crying.
Lay yourself.
I did. I feel, particularly in June here, I'm quite enjoying.
I come from South Australia, and I come from Adelaide in South Australia. And when I was a kid, I used to go on holidays to this place called Coffin Bay, and I didn't know it at the time, but from when I was born until I was quite old, the British military were testing nuclear weapons. And when I used to go on holidays, there were all these really spectacular sunsets. This is when I was quite little, and people said then to me it was because of the bombs, and like that didn't make a great deal of sense to me, but it made me look a bit differently at sunsets and stuff. And in a way, that's partly why I'm here, because the sunsets have changed, and because of a continuing process in my life where I've gradually got more and more information about what's happened in my life and what's happened to me that I had no control over, and just gradually seeing more and more of what the lies were. And it wasn't a surprise to come to Britain in a way because of the British imperialism at home, and that it was the British bomb that was affecting me and my health and my friends' health, and because of British imperialism and stuff. And I mean, it's sort of ironic that I can't come here in some ways, that I've ended up here. But, and I came here because I knew it was a women's place, and because I'd lived in situations for quite some time where I felt good and cared for and excited with lots of things happening with women, and I knew that I'd be able to function all right here, although it was still a bit of a surprise, like literally physically looking at the place, at the contrast between the common and what's inside. And something happened to me when I was on the way here that made me think a lot, which was that the coach I came down in from London to Newbury was involved in a car accident, and the car that crashed into the bus, one of the passengers died, and one had two had head injuries and stuff. And when the crash happened, like 4 people got up in the bus, and it was me and the woman I was with, and these 2 other women who were from Greenham, and I looked at them and they looked, you know, strange. And I knew that they had to be from camp, even though I didn't know anyone here at the time. And it was just sort of, it didn't seem surprising that we were the people that got up in the bus and actually went immediately to help the people or the guy that was dying, and the people who were injured, and other people were just sort of standing around, and found some of them actually doing things that weren't even useful, and kind of like thinking about that guy's death at that time, and then actually ending up taking a little bus out here and thinking about death in a wider sense was something very important when I first came.
I'd sort of dabbled in the anti-nuclear movement and felt unhappy with it for the sorts of reasons that most of us here feel unhappy with it. That I didn't, although I wasn't conscious of it at the time, I don't think I felt that I had any sort of a voice. And it was when I first learnt about the camp here, which was the autumn that they first set up, the Welsh women first set up here. And I still didn't do anything about it, and then there was stuff in the papers about them being here still over Christmas and all that, and so I came down in the first big demo, which was the March of the following year, after that Christmas, and was just totally knocked out by it. Like a lot of women, I think I'd been starved of women's company most of my life. I was married and sort of isolated in a house and had a few women friends, but they weren't, especially middle-class women, it wasn't what I'd call close friendships somehow because of the reserve and all the rest of it. And I think we've all of us probably grown and changed as the camp has grown and changed, or got smaller physically here but spread wider all over the world. I've just, the way my life's changed over this last 4.5 years, just unbelievable. And extending the sort of sympathy for other women, not excluding any of them because they're of a different race or a different class or a different religion or a different age or think differently or whatever, that I feel sisters with every woman here, even Margaret Thatcher, in a way, you know, because I think she's as much a victim of the patriarchal way of thinking as any of us, probably more than a lot of us. And she's de-sexed herself in a way. Yeah. I don't know. So it's not just the witness about the cruise missiles. It's what this weekend now is about, is the widening of the web and making links all over. And yeah.
Somebody did say to me last year or the year before, well, we failed by letting the crews in, and they can't see, or they haven't seen how all these links have been made.
Mm. Well, I think at the time we felt bad about it, but when the other side, in inverted commas, starts jumping up and down and going nya 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 at us, you can see at what level they're functioning, and they're not being serious. I mean, they thumb their noses at us every time they bring the convoy out. So if the people that are running the world are functioning on the level of 4-year-olds in a kindergarten playground, you know, I don't think you can talk about having won or lost. That's the way they think. As much as anything, although I'm very bad at it, am concerned in trying to demonstrate that there's another way of doing things without this always opposition and people winning or losing. It's not what it's supposed to be about. And I think the most telling thing I've heard recently is that some women in a South American country, and I can't even remember which one it was, but had not heard of what the capital of England was, but they'd heard of Greenham.
That's really good.
And that's what it's about. It's raising consciousness, really, not about scoring points.
I came over to England about 4 years ago.
From where?
Ireland. And I was like totally and utterly shocked. Like, my mum's English, and she'd always described England as being like a wonderful country where everything was like beautiful and so civilised and
free.
Yeah, and free, and it was like the English police are the best in the world and all this other stuff that I actually fell for a bit. I believed all this, which is really silly. And then I just sort of started coming in the beginning of '84. I mean, I'd been hearing about the camp, and I was very involved in supporting it, but not being here. Before that, when missiles came in and everything, I was sort of very involved in local CND for a bit. And then I got really dissatisfied with all that, and I just came down and decided to stay. And I've been here like on and off all the time, and it's just been like, places just changed so much. In ways it's really got much wider, and I'm really pleased that it's got wider and everything. I don't know, it's just like the whole enormity of it's just hit me a couple of weeks ago. That everything is interlinked, and like we're not separate, and I've once felt we were really cut off, like we're just like a group of women living here in the woods in a place called Berkshire in the south of England, and it was like a really strange idea that we were just like we hadn't got many links other places apart from women who came down visiting us saying how guilty they felt they weren't here. And then after loads of things happened, I just realised, like, I spent a lot of time talking to women in prison, and that was like such a wonderful experience. I just got to hear how the whole system and everything is doing it so much, and they're so strong in there, perhaps in a different way, that their focus is other places, but they're just such strong, wonderful women. And I think that's what this place is about. It's just so good to have this women's space. I'm our space, and it's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, I found it really lovely to go from here to I went on the march for mines not missiles from the Capenhurst enrichment plant to one of the pit heads, and I just found that really, really wonderful to spend time with those women, and then later to having met some of the miners' wives to actually go and stay up. I stayed in Skelmersdale, and it was just really, really incredible. I just it made me think a lot about non-violence and what that means, and also different ways of being, in my terms, non-violent here, because in fact I was seeing people act in quite different sorts of ways, and I also loved being with some of those women just because I'm working class, and because of the way they talked was familiar to me, even though we come from actually cultures that are, I mean, in some ways the Australian culture is like British culture, but in other ways it's quite different. But there were a lot of similarities between working class people in Skelmersdale and in Adelaide, where I come from, and it was just really lovely to see those women and to see the level of energy, and it was just so exciting, like staying with the women we were staying with, where we seemed to spend all day going out and collecting money and talking to people, and half the night sort of talking to all these people, and then kind of like when all the actual work was over and sorting out food parcels and things like that, like late we'd be talking until about 4 o'clock in the morning about everything, and it was really everything. And the woman I was staying with hadn't been involved in political stuff at all really before the strike, and wouldn't have thought at all about having anybody like me to stay with her. And it was just so lovely to kind of like see, to be excited by all their excitement in talking about all the issues they were talking about, and just went through everything. And she was describing having been at a picket, and then later on seeing what was on the television, on the news about it, and realised that in fact what you saw on the news wasn't in any way the truth, and in fact was often quite a deliberate distortion of it, and instantly making the connection between what she saw on the news about Northern Ireland and what she saw about Greenham and all the rest of it.
When you first came, you couldn't imagine you'd have changed so much,
No.
as well as the world or the other women.
One of the things I found when I was first here, that I didn't really realise how much I'd changed. Not long after I was first here, I was involved. There was just a very small number of us here at Green. There was about 6, and not even 6 some days. And we were trying to blockade the gate every morning because there were lots of cement trucks coming in. And 6 isn't very many to do a blockade. We'll be sitting there, and just consistently doing that, and like just sitting there in front of these enormous trucks. And sometimes the drivers were getting, they'd drive right up to your foot, and it was getting a bit awkward. That, I don't know, I'd just sort of done this for days. And then I went up to London to visit a friend, and she said she laughed at me when we were crossing the road together, and I didn't know what she was laughing at. And I asked, and she said, "You cross the road differently." And I thought, this is really strange. And I started thinking about how when you're little, like you're taught things about roads and stuff. And it's a bit like how so much of my own training when I was little was about, you don't do things like, because you're going to be afraid of it, it's going to be horrible, and that kind of stuff. And I'd actually got somehow more control of being on a road, and yet I didn't know that was the case. I was just used to, obviously I'm not going to stand in the middle of London and get run over by a bus, but I felt different, and I was standing up straighter and feeling better, and particularly I noticed when I got off the bus to London, it was one of those buses with the luggage compartment in the back, and they have a stick with a hook on it where they hook out the baggage, and I went round the back to get my pack, and there didn't happen to be one of those sticks in the back, and the guy was just standing there, and I just didn't think about it. I just climbed in and got out his baggage and took it out, because I was so used to doing things and not looking for an order from a boss or something. And I suddenly realised when I got out that I'd done something that was totally inappropriate socially. I wasn't meant to be doing anything to really funny. But it was just a little thing where I was getting more control over what I was doing, you know, because I was becoming used to me deciding.
I think, yes, I think there is, you're learning all the time to be independent and think for yourself. And you've got the confidence of knowing that your friends, or even if they're not particularly your friends, will back you up. So that you're not alone in the world, and that gives you confidence.
So that's one of the most wonderful things about it, is just having the freedom to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, and then know that you're going to be supported too. Like, someone will always, like, sort of come and check you're okay, and, like, the various catastrophes, there's always someone to look after you. And at first I was really surprised, like, I'm not really used to getting so much attention, and it's like really nice.
And another thing that's come out of what we've been doing here, I think, is to expose so-called military efficiency for the nonsense it is. Because if really a handful of women can make them withdraw to the extent they have, they've virtually abdicated the perimeter fence now on this base, and we get taunted with the fact that we haven't actually got into the silos yet, but the whole thing has retracted and shrunk, so that all they're concerned now is to protect that particular fence. And I mean, if we really were terrorists hell-bent on holding the country to ransom, it would only take a handful of us with a couple of grenades each actually to do it. So that I always was frightened of this idea of sort of technical experts, because I mean, anything I've ever had anything to do with has always gone wrong in the way of wondrous modern technology, and nobody ever seems to know how to put any of it right anyway, and that's just talking about washing machines. When you get onto all this stuff about these wondrous electronic devices and cruise missiles, it scares the pants off me. And I'm scared when I learn about the insularity of the way they think, that they're thinking as individuals and not as part of an organism. And that it wasn't until Zol and Bridget started bringing what's going on in the Pacific home to us on this island, even though we'd talked to women from Australia and from Aotearoa. I simply had not known the extent of the American occupation of the Pacific and the nuclearization of the Pacific and the way the people there are already suffering. And it took Greenham women to do that. It took just 2 women to work the pants off themselves for as long as they have. I mean, heaven knows how many stones in weight Zol's lost. She's just worn herself to a bone. And they've made the world, and CND and all us wishy-washy liberal, you know, nice-minded people here realise the enormity of what's already been done. And that it's inefficient.
We are the women of Greenham Common, and it's for freedom we're fighting. We are the women of Greenham Common, and it's for freedom we're fighting. A heavy load, and it will take some great strength. A heavy load, and it will take some great strength. We are the women of Greenham Common, and it's for freedom we're fighting. We are the women of Greenham Common, and it's for freedom we're fighting. A heavy load, and it will take some great strength. A heavy load, and it will take some great strength. It doesn't matter if they should jail us. We are free and kept alive by hope. What does it matter if they should jail us? We are free and kept alive by hope. Our struggle's hard, but victory will bring this land back to our hand. Our struggle's hard, but victory will bring the land back to our hand.
you, Freddie?
This must be the 6th year that I've been coming down to Greenham, and perhaps I came just a little bit before that when it was a mixed camp. Not to live, but just keeping visiting and finding out what was going on. It didn't mean all that much to me in the early days, and I must admit that even the base really didn't mean that much to me. It was just that I found something actually at Greenham that I'd not found before, and that was a valuable part of my life over those 6 years. It taught me to grow as a woman, to discover myself as a woman, and then discover myself as a political woman. And that's when I began confronting the base that was there and what that meant to me as a woman with a daughter that was growing up in this world. I've always been involved in politics, but not necessarily peace politics. And I think I'd perhaps been coming to Greenham 5 years before I actually turned and looked into that base. And that was 7 o'clock one morning when they were bringing crews in. And it was very misty, and we went over to the far side to see the galaxies. And it was as if all those years I've been coming, and just at that one final moment in time, I knew the reason I had been coming. And it didn't necessarily tell me what I got to do in the future, but suddenly I'd got no fear. The fence and the barbed wire just didn't hold any fear anymore. And that's when I began doing actions and going into the base and cutting and becoming aware of other bases, other military installations. And I suppose the disappointing thing was I grew very much and went back to where I lived and began being quite a nuisance to my family. And the frustrating thing is I just couldn't make them understand my need not to be with them in that safe, secure, four-walled home with a mortgage. So that took a lot. It took 2 years of arguing and turmoil before I could actually turn around and say to them that I didn't wish to live in this setup anymore. And I didn't know what setup I did wish to live in. I couldn't envisage me spending my life at Greenham, but I could see that I could spend a portion of it and go away and discover other things. And I think over the 6 years, that's what I've seen happen to lots and lots of women. And that's what gave me the confidence to know that I could travel if I wanted to. Just because I'd never done it before, just because I was getting on and reached 38, didn't mean that I couldn't get on a plane and travel wherever I wanted to. And seeing so many women leave Greenham, go to other parts of the world, come back, stay at Greenham and off somewhere else, and discovering so many things. I just held on to that seed of hope that I would be able to do that I would get the confidence to be able to do it. You know, you're entitled to go abroad once a year and go out a couple of times a week and go out to dinner in restaurants, but when you suddenly say to someone that you've got this dream of being able to travel to the far corners of the earth and fulfill a dream that you've had since you was a kid, you know, because I love mountains and I'd always had this dream to go to the Andes and, you know, romantically stand on the top and this kind of thing. And it was a dream, and, you know, dreams sometimes can be fulfilled and lots of times can't. They remain a dream. Perhaps we always do need to have dreams in us somewhere. But I decided that's what I was going to do. And so I started talking to lots of women about it and found out that a lot of women had been to South America and listened to them talk. And before you know it, somebody was giving me an address and, or a contact. And then I thought, God, this is growing out of all. I've got to do it. You know, because I've spoken about it, I've just got to do it. And so one morning I woke up and went down to breakfast, told my husband that's what I was going to do, and that I wasn't going to do it with him. And that was quite a shock. And my daughter thought it was a great idea. She thought it was wonderful. And so this last year has really been a kind of preparation of everyone else, because I know what I want to do. It was just preparing everyone else and explaining to everyone else why I wanted to do it. And now it's getting closer and closer. And not only am I going to Peru now, but over that year I'm going to America, Canada, Alaska, New Zealand. I might be going on a boat to the Antarctica. So all within a year of never travelling alone or living alone, I'm suddenly going to all the points of the earth and meeting people. Addresses and people that heard a woman wants to travel. You know, you come and stay with us. You want to travel here, you come. And that's what's happened at Greenham. You know, and that's what's happening all the time. It's lovely when I come down now and I can sit at the side of a fire at Greengate and there's lots of young women, 18 and 19-year-old women, that sit around and we can talk about, one was a hairdresser, and we talk about pop music and silly things like that, you know, that my daughter talks about. And then we talk about Greenham and what it means to them, and it doesn't mean all that much. They don't know what they're actually here for. They've just found a place that they feel good being at, and it's uncomfortable and it's cold and they complain and moan. But they might go away, but they always seem to come back together again. And I think that's the thing with Greenham. It will go on. It's a place that will be remembered and go on forever and ever. And I would like to think and hopefully be a part of women being here until every piece of concrete's been removed from that place. And that's looking a long, long way ahead. But, you know, as a romantic and a dreamer, I could perhaps see the day when the last piece of concrete will be taken off the common, and hopefully I'm here or my daughter's here doing it. And not only here, but all the bases, wherever they are, until, you know, that one beautiful day when we all stand together and it's all finished and we can get on with the job of feeding each other and living together, and you know, that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff that, you know, you feel inside and you sometimes really feel a bit awkward about saying, and because it's a dream. But dreams are nice. I'm fulfilling one dream. So, you know, the ultimate dream of world peace. If you can fulfill one little dream, you can fulfill big ones as well.